Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this quick little session on how to prepare your manuscript. We're going to dive right in, but I'm so excited to be able to do this for you all and chat about one of the most fun things, in my opinion, in the publishing industry, which is the manuscript itself and how to get it ready for a literary agent or a small press or indie publisher or self publishing as well. This is mainly going to talk about submitting to literary agents and small presses, but this is also a good way to get your manuscript ready if you choose to go a different direction in publishing as well. So let's dive right in. Just to introduce myself real quickly, my name is Andie. I am a young adult author, I'm a literary agent, and I'm also a freelance editor. I am currently at the Booker Albert Literary Agency, where I have been for almost 2 years now, coming up in the next couple of months here. I am the founder of Sun and Spine's Editorial, which is my own editorial services that I run for authors. And I'm an editor at Wild Ink Publishing as well, where I do developmental edits and copy edits, proofreading services for authors that are being published with Wild Ink or their sister imprint, Conquest Publishing, as well. I have several years of experience in the publishing industry. I grew up in Central Florida, where I still am today, and grew up a part of many different journals and magazines that I've been writing and editing for in my time as well before I dipped into more traditional publishing. So I absolutely love anything to do with books. I grew up an avid reader. That turned into being an author, which then turned into being a literary agent and now an editor. So anything I can do in the book world and help authors as much as possible, that's what I enjoy most. And when I'm not doing anything in publishing, I'm either reading for my own pleasure and knocking on that TBR list that is never ending, or I'm hanging out at Disney World with my husband. It's been a privilege to live in Central Florida, and that's one thing that we love to do. Okay, so diving right in, let's start with the most important question, and that's why is it important to format your manuscript? Let's get a little bit of background in here and understand the why behind it all so we know what we're doing and how we can make it the best version that we can possibly be before we're sending it to agents or small presses. So, one of the main reasons is literary agents are very busy people. There is always something to do for us in this industry. We are either reading through query submissions, we're reading full manuscript submissions, we're working on current client projects and getting projects ready to go on submission, or if they have an opportunity for a revise and resubmit, we're working on R&Rs and revisions with our authors that are on submission. We're working on their next projects, and we're also attending conferences and doing presentations like this, doing pitch events, whether those be online or in person. There's many different variety of those. So we're always doing something. There is always an event or task or job that we are supposed to pursue. We're busy people, and formatting your manuscript can really help us get a good insight into your story, into yourself as a writer as well. Most importantly, it demonstrates professionalism. It shows that you did your research, that you're serious about your book and your story, and that you want it to go far, and you want someone else to take it as seriously as you do. And again, this is your first impression. So, most of the time, you only have one shot when it comes to submitting to a literary agent. There are a lot of agents that do reconsider projects after a specific number of months or if it's undergone significant revisions. But for the most part, you want to think that this is your first impression. This is your shot for a literary agent to read your story and hopefully offer representation to you so that you can then take it and sell it to a publishing house. So you want to make it count. You want not only to demonstrate professionalism, but you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to benefit your story and let your story and yourself shine through at the same time. One very common reason is that it just makes it easier to read and find information. We're going to go over what to include in formatting your manuscript and things like that as well. But contact information is going to be key. And also, it makes it easy to go through chapters and bookmark things and highlight things. A lot of us literary agents read on many different devices. Me, for example, I love to read manuscripts on my Kindle. It just makes it feel more fun and less like I'm doing a ton of work, because I am just reading a story and trying to understand if I connect with it. And of course, I'm taking notes the entire time, but it makes it different, and it puts you in a different headspace and a different environment for me. So I like to do that. Or I'll switch it up and read on my iPad, which is a little bit similar. And there's a lot of times where I'm reading on my laptop, especially when traveling and things like that too. So there's many different devices that we kind of switch between. So if your manuscript is formatted perfectly and in the right way, that makes it a lot easier for us to kind of go back to where we were, or flip through pages, chapters, find things we highlighted, find your contact information, and just be able to see everything more clearly. And lastly, the most fun, it makes it feel like a real book, which can be a really beautiful thing to change your mindset about your own manuscript. So, regardless of what you do, you should always format it for that reason too, because it takes it to another level and it shows that this is something that you did and you should be proud of that accomplishment. And why not make it the best version of itself that you possibly can? Okay, so let's sort of back up a minute and start with the basics. What is important when formatting your manuscript? What are we talking about here? What are we looking for? Let's start with the text. And this is going to be what is considered industry standard. So we want our text to be 12-point font. We want it to be Times New Roman. We want it to be black color. A lot of times it can be fun to have different color text, different size text, different fonts, but we need it to be as standard as possible, like I said beforehand, to be able to read it easily and find the correct information. So there are special occasions where I've seen authors make text different fonts for their characters texting or writing a letter or a journal entry or things like that. And most of the time, that's okay, but I would recommend playing it safe and just sticking to industry standard. You can always use italics or underlines to differentiate those things. But for the most part, we want it to stick to 12-point Times New Roman black. We want our text to be double spaced and left aligned as well. In terms of the page, we want you to use Microsoft Word. And I know that can be tricky with our Google Doc lovers. There's also some other writing platforms that authors use all the time as well. I love writing in Google Docs myself, but you'll want to eventually start drafting in Microsoft Word, because when you write in Google Docs and then export it to Word, you're going to have more problems than you think you will in trying to fix the formatting, because there are a lot of things that don't carry over in that export that you'll have to go back and fix. So if you can, start practicing in Microsoft Word, but overall the end product that you are sending to a literary agent or a small publisher will be a Microsoft Word document unless they ask for a PDF. And you want that to be a standard 8.5 by 11 page and 1-inch margins. Something else to include is a header, and we're going to go over some examples of what this looks like too. But the header is super important to have on every page. You just want it to be simple, the title of your book and your last name on the left side of the page. You can do your full name if you want to. If your name's really long, then you may just want to go with your last name so it doesn't take up too much space, but have that on the left side of the page at the top. And then we want a page number on there as well. The page number can be on the right or it can be on the bottom. It's kind of your preference. There is no right or wrong, but as long as we have a page number somewhere, that's what's most important. You'll also want to include a cover page, and we'll go over what this looks like and what to include on it, but just know we will have a cover page at the beginning of our manuscript. One of the most important ones to have numbered chapters. Have these centered on the page. You can bold this, you can underline it, you can italicize it, whatever you want to do, but as long as we see chapter 1, chapter 2 in the center of the page, separated from the rest of your text that way, so we know that we're on a new chapter, that's what's most important to us. And another important note is when we indent our first line, we want to indent the first line. And I'm going to go over this specifically, but please do not hit the tab key. This is an easy way to indent, yes, but it actually doesn't come out the way you think it does when uploading your manuscript and then when the agent downloads it, like I said, onto one of their many devices, especially on tablets or Kindles. If you tab, it sends your text like way over in another direction and it's not aligned with the next paragraph and it's very difficult to read. So we want to indent our first line, but do not use tab. We also want to use page breaks for new chapters. Don't just hit enter a bunch of times or space a bunch of times. Use the insert page break function, whether you're on Google Docs or Word. There is one on both. That way it breaks it off nicely, again, to make it easier for the agent to read, and it doesn't continue from the previous page, or we have to click through a bunch of empty blank pages because they actually inserted pages instead of just using a page break function. For scene breaks, the industry standard is to use the asterisks. 3 asterisks is all you need. You can bold them if you want, you don't have to. Center them on the page just like you do your chapter numbers. And a lot of authors like to get creative with this and use fun images or other symbols for their scene breaks. And that's okay, but we really do prefer the industry standard of the asterisks. We can always play around with fun things to do for these in formatting with a publisher. So it can definitely change, but to get it to a literary agent for the first read through, first impression, keep it at the industry standard, the 3 asterisks. Again, this just makes it easier to read. If you put in a cute image of a cat, for example, for the scene break, and I download it on my Kindle, that's not going to come through. And instead, there's going to be a really big, weird box or a question mark that also goes into your text and takes up your story. And it just completely messes up the way I'm trying to read the manuscript and almost makes it not functional. So something you don't see on your end, but is helpful for us on our end. Okay, so I wanted to include an example. So this is everything that we just talked about. So this is an example of first page, chapter 1. You'll see we have our header at the top here, and then we go right into chapter 1. So chapter 1 is centered, it's bolded because we can bold it, because why not? And then we go right into our first line. So we have our first line. You'll notice our first line is not indented. This is completely optional. This is more of something that you will do before a book is being published. Some publishers do have the first line of any new chapter or scene not indented. Some indent them, so it's really up to them. I prefer to have the first line not indented just because that is the way I see most books done, so it's fun for me to read it that way. So optional, but your first line doesn't have to be indented. We do want our first line to be an attention-grabbing line that immediately hooks the reader, so we're in, we're ready to go. And then we have our next paragraph. The first line of the paragraph is indented, but we did not use tab to indent it. We're also using 1 space between our sentences, and all of our lines are double spaced. Our font size is 12 point Times New Roman. We're using a black font color. We're on a standard 8.5 by 11 page with 1-inch margins. Our text is left aligned, and we have, again, our chapter number center on the page. We have a header at the top, and that includes the title of our book and our last name as the author on the left side, and the page numbers on the right side. The page number can also be at the bottom, like I said, but on this example, it is at the top right corner. Our page number also starts on the first chapter or the first page and not on our cover page, and we're going to talk about that as well. Then we have a scene break. If we want to use a scene break, we're using the standard 3 asterisks. They are centered on the page. And to start a new chapter, we're going to use the page break function. So this is a good example of how to set up your manuscript, the first page, and then carry this over into the rest of your pages. Okay, now to talk about the cover page. What do we put on a cover page? The cover page is going to be the very first page before your chapter starts. It's going to be focused on the information that is centered toward the middle of the page, and that's going to include your book's title, your full name, the word count of your manuscript, the genre, and most importantly, your contact information. This should at least include your phone number, email address, a website if you have it. You can include social media handles. The one thing you don't have to include is your physical address. So you're welcome to do that, but there's no reason why a literary agent needs your physical address to read your manuscript. So you don't need to include that on here, but this is so we can get in touch with you quickly. Let's say, for example, an agent is reading their manuscript on an airplane and we don't have access to Wi-Fi at the moment, but we want to reach out and immediately set up a call, especially if it's something we're super excited about. Having your quick phone number and email address so that we can just do that as soon as we get access to the internet instead of going back into Query Manager or digging through our emails for that information in your query letter. It's very helpful to have that on hand. And then you'll also include your pitch. And this is optional, but I do find it's very helpful if you include your 3 to 4 sentence maybe pitch on the cover page. Again, this is for accessibility and to make your manuscript convey what it needs to in the short period of time that an agent is going to look at it. So this doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can be a shortened version of your query letter, and it just has to be a couple of lines, and it's mainly a reminder to the agent. So again, similar to the contact information, I download so many manuscripts onto my Kindle, and I don't have Query Manager on my Kindle, so I can't go back and look at the query. So when I open a manuscript, it's super helpful to just have a quick little blurb reminding me what this book is about and why I requested it and why I'm excited to read it. So it can be super helpful to have that on there for the agent, just to remind them a quick little reference of what your book is about so that we know, again, for accessibility, readability, and to just remind us as we are jumping around, and whether we use Query Manager or an email inbox for queries, it's helpful to not have to go back and reference it once we have the full manuscript. You'll also have a header on your cover page. This will be a little bit different than on your first page with where your chapter starts, because this will just have the title and the author last name. We don't want a page number on our cover page. We want this to be just sort of a blanket overall literal cover page. Think about if you were printing it out and it was just the introduction to the piece that you're starting. There's a few different ways you can do this. You can select different first page under the Insert tab on Microsoft Word, or if that doesn't work, sometimes you have to play around with formatting the page numbers, which is a setting in Microsoft Word, and you have to hit Start at 0 for the page numbers. And you'll see that in Microsoft Word. It's very easy to just manipulate of how you can format your page numbers. Instead of starting at counting at 1, you start at counting at 0. And if you set it to have a different first page, it's not going to show the 0, but you then are starting at the 1 is showing on your next page where your chapter starts. So here's an example of our cover page. So you'll see at the top here, we have our header, which includes the title of our book and our last name. Right there in the center, nice and focused, is our book title. We can bold it to make it stand out. We have our full author name underneath it, our word count, the genre, and our contact information with a phone number and an email address. And then right underneath that, we skip a line, and then we have the pitch of our book. Like I said, this can be a summary of the query letter or the one paragraph pitch that you use in a query submission form. It should be just around 3 to 4 lines. And again, this is just a quick pitch and reminder to the agent of what the book is about. Okay, so we talked a little bit about line indentations, and I mentioned that we don't want to hit that tab button. We want to indent our lines properly. So how do we do that? So I wanted to include screenshots here for both Google Docs and Microsoft Word because I know we draft in one or the other and we have a preference. Ultimately, we want everything to be Microsoft Word, but even I can admit that Google Docs makes drafting so much easier and more pretty to do as well. So we'll stick with it. It's fine. So for Google Docs, these is how you're going to find how to indent your first line. You're going to go to the format option in your toolbar, hit align and indent. Then you're going to select indentation options, then special indent. And you'll see here that brings up this. So special indent, you'll select first line and you'll set it to 0.5 and then select apply. It's very similar in Microsoft Word. It's just finding different ways to go about it. So in Microsoft Word, you'll hit home on your toolbar at the top. You'll go to the paragraph section and you'll want to hit paragraph settings, which is going to be the little arrow in the right corner of that section. Then you'll hit indents and spacing. That will bring up this box here after you go to paragraph settings. So you see this first tab on this screenshot is indents and spacing. You'll stay there, go down to 2, that second section where you see indentation. You'll want to go all the way to the right where it says special. Select that drop down and hit first line, set it to 0.5, and then select OK. And this will automatically set the rest of your lines to indent at the first line. So you don't have to do this for every single paragraph. You don't have to do it for every single page. Do it at the very beginning before you start writing, and it will carry through for the rest of the manuscript. So you don't have to worry about making sure your first line of each paragraph is indented properly, making sure you hit tab every single time or you space 5 times. You don't have to worry about any of that. You literally just have to do this once and then it's set for the rest of your document. You do have to make sure you set it every time you open a new document, but you don't have to keep setting it to keep writing on the same document. Okay, so now we talked about formatting our manuscript and what that looks like, what all goes into it, why it's important, what we really need to do, how to set up our cover page, how to indent lines properly. So I wanted to take a moment and address the question of how do we know that our manuscript is ready to send to agents? And we have a little checklist here. There's probably things on this that I'm missing. This is kind of just an overall ready to know if your manuscript should be sent to agents or if it still needs some work. So, how you know your manuscript is ready is if you can answer that this is your second or maybe third or maybe more than that draft, and that you've done a few passes and rounds on it. You've had at least 2 to 3 beta readers or critique partners that have read it. They've given you feedback. You've taken the time to revise and you've incorporated their feedback. And you've done at least 2 passes on the manuscript after you've done those revisions. It should be pretty clean of grammar or sentence structure issues. Of course, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be as clean as possible. And ultimately, the manuscript is as polished as you can possibly make it at this point, and you need a literary agent to take it a step further, or it is perfect and a literary agent will only have a couple of notes for you to tweak things and then get it out on submission to editors after signing for representation. But it should be the best that you can possibly do, and it's not just what you wrote in a span of 5 minutes and are submitting it right away. That's when it's ready to send to an agent or a small press. It's not ready if it's your first draft. It's not ready if it's not even a complete draft. Most literary agents will only take full completed manuscripts. It's not ready if your word count doesn't fit your genre. So if you're writing a young adult fantasy novel, for example, and your word count is 20,000, it's not ready. We need to beef that up quite a bit and do some research and understand what the standard word count is for our genre and make sure that we are hitting that before we're submitting it to agents. It's not ready if no one has read it. And we might think that it is the greatest story ever to be told, but it's super important to have eyes on your work, whether that's a beta reader or a trusted critique partner, a writing group. There are so many writers and readers in the writing community that you can reach out to read your work for free. You don't have to hire a developmental editor or a freelance editor. You can have someone read it for free in the community. And they love doing that because they like to return the favor and then swap stories and do things together, and play off each other's feedback. So make sure you're having people read it, provide you feedback and their thoughts so that you can incorporate it. And this kind of plays into the next couple of points, but it's not ready if there's a few plot holes, if we're missing things of the story, if pieces don't connect or make sense, if it has severe grammar and sentence structure issues, it's not ready. And that kind of brings us back to professionalism and showing that you did your work and your research and you're willing to put in the effort. And it's not ready if your main character's development is unclear, if your pacing is off, and so many other things that can go into this. But overall, make sure that your manuscript is ready before you send it to a literary agent. So what's next? Your manuscript is formatted. It's ready to send to a literary agent. What do you do now? The first thing you want to do is research, and you can probably do this while you're working on your manuscript, or it's with beta readers or things like that, so that you have this list ready to go. But you want to start making a list of agents and or small presses that you want to submit it to. Get their contact information, their submission links ready to go. Maybe add some notes on why you want to submit to them. If they have things on their MSWL that you want to reference in your query letter or that you just think would be a good fit for, it's good to have that. Make sure you have a .word or a .pdf version of the manuscript. These are typically the only two ways that you're going to submit manuscripts to a literary agent or a small press. Most common is Word. Sometimes they will be asking for PDF versions, so just make sure you have one of each ready to go. Then start submitting and submit your queries. Wait for a full request, and once that comes in, celebrate because that's a huge achievement and it's very exciting. And don't forget to send your manuscript so that the agent can read it, love it, and hopefully find their next favorite client. And that's it. So short and sweet, to the point, but I hope this was helpful in understanding why it's important to format your manuscript so that you know what to do and the work that goes into it, what we should be looking for in formatting our manuscript, some examples of how to do that, what our cover page should include, how to indent our lines properly, and ultimately how to know when our manuscript is ready to send to agents. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment and let us know. But I hope this information was helpful, and I wish you the best of luck in getting your manuscript ready to send to a literary agent.